It's time for another episode of The Wrong Idea. In case you're unfamiliar, being wrong is about embracing subjective experience over objective truth. We're not interested in being correct, we just want to explore our own insights and opinions. I'm Lucas, hanging out with my brother Jack, and we are in the midst of a deep dive on personal knowledge management systems, which is a mouthful. And Jack is going to tell us a little bit about where we're going today.
So today we are introducing what we believe our idea of something which we've dubbed the modern second brain. Sort of an adaptation of a term popularized by Tiago Forte of the second brain, which he sort of called a note-taking system, a way to manage your knowledge. But we believe that as technology, specifically AI, is getting better and better, there is a need to sort of redefine this term, what it means, what its capabilities are, and what it allows you to do. So we think that calling it a second brain is still incredibly applicable because that's what it is. Maybe you want to call it an active, a living, or just a modern second brain is sort of how we think about this in our heads, and we want to go into what this sort of is, what it's going to do, and what it's going to allow you to do in today's episode.
It's actually really funny to me that given how recent of a concept the second brain is, the fact that we are already modernizing it is just kind of hilarious. But yeah, I mean, in a sense, I like that concept of the second brain more than any other terminology I've heard. So I think it's still valuable to call it a second brain, but I think that what that means to me is different than Tiago Forte's original usage, which I think is much more just about kind of a knowledge, a storage vault for your knowledge. And the what I'm thinking about is a lot more, like you said, kind of active and has the ability to engage more with you. And this is enabled by a lot of the advances in AI in recent years.
Yeah, for sure. It is funny, right, that the world is evolving so quickly and technology is evolving so quickly that you need to refine such a new term so quickly. However, the capabilities of AI are remarkable, and it seems to not be slowing whatsoever. It only seems like the development is getting faster and its capabilities are becoming greater and greater. So it would seem sort of inadequate or just sort of oblivious to not recognize what AI unlocks with this concept of a second brain.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And it's hard to tell exactly what the rate of progress is going to be with AI going forward, but it's even if it doesn't progress too much further, and I still believe there's room, and I still believe that the next foundation models will provide us with even more features and even more capabilities that than we have today. But even if you just took what we had today, I still think modern knowledge management software is not fully taking advantage of that yet. So I think there's plenty of room, even if we didn't move on further, we still have this new range of capabilities that are primarily driven by this these advances in language processing and I guess content generation as well, just more broadly. But I think that in particular, it's the ability to understand and interact via natural language that makes such a big difference.
That's a really good point. It sort of just feels like you now have a note-taking system which interacts with you is I think one of the big points that we want to sort of talk about here, because for a long time note-taking systems were very much so a static thing. They didn't really do anything. They weren't You weren't really able to build so much on them. Well, that's not so true. You could build on them, however, a lot of it would have to be very much so your own research or your own doing. But now with AI, it can engage with what you have. It can engage with the content that you give it, and you can, pick and choose bits of it that you like and you want to add to your notes and then make new notes about all of this stuff. It sort of gives a new way to do research and develop and act upon the notes that you have.
So active assistance, this is kind of the first piece of it for me, which is to your point, you use the word static, which I really like because I do think that this is the big difference here is a between the original uses of second brain and what I'm trying to conceive of it as now is the difference between a static and a dynamic model. where static means unchanging, dynamic means it sort of changes over time. And yes, I do think that you could argue, of course, knowledge management systems are somewhat dynamic in the sense that they evolve as you put more content into them and refine it. I guess my point is it's not dynamic in the sense of once you've put information in, that information is static. What I'm thinking of is in a situation where you have AI, it could be theoretically reorganizing that information for you, tagging that information for you, summarizing that information, doing things actively with it that right now, when you just dump information is in, it lives there in that form until you change it.
This is a good point, and I don't really know of very much that does this yet, but it seems entirely reasonable and not far fetched whatsoever that not too far off in the future, AI will be able to just engage with our notes at, I don't know if free will is the right way to put it, but that seems like the right way to sort of say it. It sort of will have the capability to look at what you have, give you feedback, give you input, further develop it. And I think that it's going to be a big step because I know that for me being in school, if I have a massive note, one of my biggest notions is for my Spanish class. And in Spanish too, I had the biggest leap in maybe almost any learning journey that I've ever had, going from someone who could barely speak any Spanish to essentially becoming conversational. And that was largely due in part to the fact that I took good notes. The teacher and I had a good relationship, and the way that he taught very much so resonated with me. But if I had an AI robot which could go into that document and see what I have in there and extend upon it and give me notes or give me other things which might be good to learn around the concepts that I'm sort of taking in at the time. I could not even imagine where I would be with my Spanish speaking today, let alone anything else. And I think that it really just sort of, I almost used this word maybe before, but it sort of feels like it starts to compound on top of itself. The developments and the things which it brings to the table just start to stack and stack and stack, and it just creates this process which is entirely new and different, and it changes the entire game.
I think for me, I would summarize this very simply. It's unlike traditional systems, this modern second brain is about an, enabling you to think, plan, and create more efficiently. And it can do that by offering you insights and suggestions and connections, which is something that it's never been able to do before. Instead of that information just sitting there, you're actively able to have this system extract insights for you. That's a whole different mechanism than has ever been available to us. So that's what I mean when I'm thinking of this active assistance aspect.
Yeah, this is a very good point. I think that once this starts to become a more common term, or maybe common thought is the right way to put it, not to say that this has like never been thought of before, but it certainly doesn't feel very mainstream yet, that once models start to come out and develop this, it's going to be interesting to see how this rolls into school, because I'm still in school, but it seems that the teachers and the admin are a little hesitant towards what AI can do. As a matter of fact, one of my oldest and most rigid teachers is one of the most open to AI that I know, which I think is quite interesting. Once it starts to become a more integrated part of life, I'm curious to see how it will tie into things like school, or even for you, how it might tie into work more and more with, needing to get, of course, because you're a software developer, using it to get your jobs done, how that changes what developers might be needed, what skills might be looked for, all of those things.
You're talking about some really interesting points, and I've said this to you many times, but I think that it's not unsurprising that there is a lot of opposition to AI in the education space, but I also think at the same time like AI is what's going to save education. So at some point I think we'll get there where we realize how to use this stuff effectively. But this also reminds me of something you said a few minutes ago where you were talking about the fact that yeah, a lot of these systems don't really seem to be doing this proactively. I have seen a few apps that try to integrate AI into the note taking experience. So, for example, I think the thing that was shown to me was like kind of a Notion with AI. Even though I mean Notion has AI features, but it was sort of like an AI first Notion, I guess is the way to put it. I think it was called Mem AI or something like that, and it was again, yeah, it had these AI features, but it didn't feel to me like too much was happening without me having to direct its efforts. I could ask for summaries on things, or I could ask it to like come up with tags to categorize different material or whatever. But I mean, I guess there were some features where, for example, maybe it was doing some sort of semantic chunking and it was able to sort of surface related notes in the sidebar or whatever. But I think that the kind of active processes we're talking about are a lot more like once these things are deeply integrated and it's there's actually kind of an assistant running in the background there that's legitimately trying to synthesize and understand your notes and work with you. So I think that just to kind of be clear, because I know there are already is AI in some of these apps, like it's not quite the level of integration that I'm thinking about.
No, not at all. And I've seen some demonstrations of mem AI before, and I was thinking like, oh yeah, the little notes in the sidebar that pop up that sort of draw connections between your notes. Yeah, that's not really what we're thinking. Again, it's sort of been done, but like you said, it's a deeper level of integration which we're looking towards here. Because I mean, really, what I think is going to be cool is once it starts to recognize context. Maybe it will start to notice how you take notes in certain styles, or if you're, maybe you have. I'm going to go back to my example because I can go to cars and yap about this all day, but I might voice my disdain for Lamborghini owners as a pride Ferrari owner. Not me, dad, but point stands. So maybe it might notice that in its future research, it will, maybe want to avoid bringing in more Lamborghini research. I don't know, something like that. But once it starts to be able to explore your notes and not only, aid in what it sees, because right now it doesn't really have any sort of scope, it only has what you give it. But eventually, at some point, I would only imagine that it will be able to explore your notes, gain context on your notes, and then create better sort of assistance for you for the notes that it's looking at based upon the context of your other notes, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, you're absolutely right to be moving us towards this idea of contextual awareness. It's sort of the ability of these assistants to recognize what is meaningful to you and surface it when and where you need it. I think that this is something that the power, again, the power of this natural language processing, one of the biggest parts of this is the idea of it being able to understand the semantic value of statements, being able to connect things not just by keyword searches or whatever, but by legitimately the meaning of the phrases that you're using. It can understand now at a deeper level, and that fundamentally changes the way we think about relating our knowledge to different pieces of knowledge, relating our knowledge in this graphical kind of interconnected form where there's always ways that one idea might connect to another that we didn't think about, and being able to have that contextual awareness, again, just to emphasize that term because I think this is sort of the second big piece for me, is the key that natural language processing unlocks.
It sort of seems to me as if your brain is almost a little bit like a subterranean subway system. Like, I don't remember if you ever saw this. There was something on the internet where the Japanese government had bacteria redesign the Tokyo subway system, and it ended up doing it in a more efficient. It might have been yeast or something. It redesigned the entire subway system in a more efficient way than it had been done before, and it sort of feels like this is almost what AI might be able to do for you in sort of like a in like an analogous sense. Like, just to use an analogy, it seems as if AI will be able to draw connections and see things that maybe you won't see in your notes, and it will create this sort of new way for you to look at your workflows and everything, because you might not see a connection, but it will see this little roadmap, this little detour which it can take, which will sort of almost, not saying this is how it's going to work or how it's going to feel. This is a little bit dramatized. It will sort of shove you into something which might end up opening up your mind to a whole other, perspective or option for what you were going to do. So it sort of seems even like beyond just enhancing your notes, it can also just help enhance your thinking.
I love this idea. In fact, it reminds me of, for example, I don't know if Dad has ever talked to you about this, but he likes to throw the coins for the I Ching. Do you know about this?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, and then similar types of things like I've used tarot cards, for example. I mean, the reason that I find those things to be interesting and useful is because they sort of focus my awareness on something that I am wanting, some problem I'm wanting to solve. But then because there's this aspect of random chance and this aspect of something that isn't your mind working on the problem, you can see what the coins tell you or what the cards say. It sort of gives you a chance to come to an insight that you might not have come to just within your own mind. This external aspect is helpful to you. And I think part of that's what you're talking about here, where it's actually able to potentially help you brainstorm, give you insights and suggestions, and make connections that you could not necessarily see if you were just running this through in your own head, right?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned this because it makes me think about the Einstein quote that you brought up to me a couple of nights ago, which is problems cannot be solved with the same minds that created them. And yeah, it's quite literally that, except at this point, it's not really another mind necessarily, even though we call it a second brain. It's just something else. I don't know a good way to put it into words, but I assume you can see what I'm thinking here is that it's just something which prompts your brain to think in a way that it wasn't thinking before, to gain an insight that it couldn't have had, right? So anything that can sort of do that, like you said, tarot cards, I Ching, maybe it's going to start to become AI or something like that. But you really just diversifying your perspectives in general just stands to be one of the most powerful tools that you can have because you get different perspectives that you'll never have considered in your mind at first. And I think it will aid everybody who uses any sort of, AI or sort of apps or, maybe you want to say, you get the tarot cards of the I Ching, for example, to find outside perspectives on anything. It seems like once it starts to become more integrated into AI models, that the ideas and the problem solving and the way that people might be able to attack their learning and their management and all of this stuff, the retrieval, the organization, will just like, again, I use this term compounding, but it really just compounds on top of each other in itself in so many different ways.
I don't want to get us too far off track, but you were saying something there that reminded me of the thing that I realized a few months ago where I was thinking about AI and I was like, what's really going to be the point where things change is where you're not prompting the AI is prompting you.
I remember you saying this to me, and this is a good point. This might be one of the first ways that we've practically thought about this being implemented, but it's certainly something interesting to think about. And maybe that's a little discussion which you and me can record at another time and upload as a little piece of filler between a couple of our next deep dives.
Yeah, well, there's something to what you were saying that stuck out there, which is yeah, absolutely. When you get to the point where it's prodding you and letting you think, like helping you think, and kind of similar to what you were also just saying, it's not that the second brain is thinking, quote unquote, but at the same time, it kind of is. It's like the second brain now has the ability to be active, to participate in the research or learning process. It can be a guide or a partner to work with you through these things. So I think that's interesting. And I guess that leads me sort of to the next point here, which is sort of this continuous learning and adaptation that happens is if you have a system that learns with you, it's sort of able to recognize what you're trying to accomplish and help you move closer to those goals.
Right, it has skills that you don't have, and you have skills that it doesn't have. So it's again, we talked about leveraging the skills that you have and leveraging what the computer has. It would be great if the computer can recognize what you have that it doesn't and what it does that you don't, so it can even optimize what it's doing on top of optimizing what you're doing. So again, compounding, it seems to come back the more that I think about this. But yeah, absolutely, having something which can learn and grow and adapt with you, I think would be the ultimate goal, because you don't just want to have a generic assistant helping you with your work. That's one of the things that I think we could probably talk to Dad about, and he'd tell us something fairly similar. The longer he had an assistant for, he had Josh for gosh knows how many years. So they had a really good relationship. So he knew how Dad liked to work. And you would love to have an AI model start to adapt to get to know how you like to work.
Yeah, I mean that makes such a big difference. And it's not, today what we have are sort of very limited customization options where we can give some level of, different apps are going to cater to different note taking styles or whatever, but the way that we can actually interact with these things and make it our own is limited because we're essentially people are building apps for lots of people and they're going to work the same way, but they're going to allow they need to allow some level of expressiveness for the individual. So I think the difference in the next generation of knowledge management systems will be something where it's personalized in a different way. It adapts to the way you're using the functionality starts to fit individual needs better.
Yeah, it starts to mold to you rather than you trying to like mold it to you is sort of how it feels. It will sort of just get a better sense for what you want and you not have to tell it what you want and then try and figure out how it can best interpret how you're telling it what you want, if that made any sense. But I think that once it starts to have that sort of, if we want to call it the next generation of what AI can do, you start to think about how it will integrate into these different systems. Apps like Notion is one of our favorites. It's my favorite for sure. It makes me interested to see how they might want to integrate a model like that, because of course they do have a AI function, but do they want to use that? Do they want to integrate something different? I mean, it's just an entirely new thing to think about, and it's an entirely new thing to have to consider when building a note taking app.
Well, this is why I think it's such an interesting prospect, because yeah, it was relatively easy to integrate some of these features as Notion has done, or as Mem has done, or other apps that are trying to go for this AI assisted note taking effort. But again, I think these are still fitting within the traditional model of note taking. And we're going to be looking at that more in detail as we go. But I think that what I'm imagining is a more akin to a system that is constantly on and aware and active and processing in the background. It's not so much that AI is activated when you say it is, it's more that it's kind of there and working constantly to anticipate your needs. I guess that's the level of personalization that I'm talking about here, is that I think when it starts to realize that uh, you like to do things a certain way and offer you content to make that easier, or make a suggestion that will help keep you on track. I think these are important things where it can tell you're working on a project. You've maybe put it aside for a little bit, but it knows that this is something that's meaningful to you. It might be able to prod you and say, hey, you haven't done anything on this. I was thinking that maybe the next step might be something like this, or what do you think we should do next to make progress here? And that might get you involved again. So I just think that there's a different level of interactivity that happens when you have not just AI enabled features, but an actual AI assistant working with you.
Well, I mean, think about this. This just popped into my head. Imagine if you're working on something that is maybe more creative heavy than it is like brute force heavy. But for whatever reason, your brute force mind is, or your brute force, talons are out. You feel like you're really just down to brute force some work. And the AI somehow, I don't even know how this would happen, might notice that you're doing better with the brute force work and you're struggling a little bit with the creativity. So it might recommend to you to do work on a little bit more of a brute force project and then come back to the creative project later. Or if your creative juices are really flowing, then maybe it'll be like, oh, go pop over to this like sort of creative project that you have. Because I feel like at that point, it not only enhances your creativity and it enhances your productivity, but it leverages the skills that you're good at to another level. It leverages what you have because it allows you to do it more, but it can also allow you to do it more at the times when you feel motivated and at the times when you're doing it best.
That's such a fascinating point, because you're absolutely right. Think about the fact that in those GPT-4o videos that came out recently, where it was the AI was actually able to listen to the tone of your voice and understand your emotional state based on that. Imagine that. I mean, the example you gave makes some sense, but like maybe to concretize it a little bit, imagine you sit down and it can tell what time of day it is, and it can tell based on the tone that you're speaking, you're tired, it's the end of the day, you've been doing a lot of stuff, but you need to make progress. And it realizes that because you're in that state, maybe you're not going to be as good at coming up with newer creative ideas. Maybe what you need is some mindless task to just keep you busy and help you make progress. And it can surface what that task is because it knows all the things that you're trying to accomplish and knows what you need to get done. That is not even that far fetched of a thing that could happen, with existing technology, which is crazy to think about.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking about. Because, I mean, there are days when I come home from the gym and I'm just knackered, but I have schoolwork that I need to get done. But sometimes I'm like, I'll wake up the next morning and I'll be like, oh, flip, I wish I had done that. But, like you said, having an assistant which can unearth those projects or those tasks which you need to do, maybe to keep you busy, just to get the progress done would be huge. I mean, I couldn't even think about how much more productive it would make me. I'm pretty productive. I tend to get things done in a timely manner most times, but I also know that I do struggle with trying to, complete brute force tasks and creative tasks at sort of depending upon my mood, and maybe trying to remember all the things that I'm working on is difficult because it might be spread across a couple of different things. There's so many mediums which I have, but having something which could prompt me towards doing the work which I might be best for at the time would be a game changer, like on another level.
That's exactly what we're talking about. Like, I'm totally with you, and I think that the more you talk about it, and the more realistic I realize how it sounds. Like, I could see this being the kind of thing that shows up in apps like in the next year or two, and you would literally be able to just, yeah. I mean, one of the things that stuck out to when you were saying that to me is like, even just thinking about what I have to do right now, like trying to remember what all the things are and like keep that straight. That's stuff that the computer can do now for you and like literally be like, hey, you need to do these things. Seems like right now this would be the best thing. Like if you can just knock this out, boom. And that would even just get you into the productivity flow. I think feel like some of the barrier is literally just getting to that point where it's like, okay, I have to do something right now. What am I going to do? And like that takes mental effort. And as ridiculous as it sounds, like that might be the activation or energy required to get into that state. Like figuring out what to do might be too much. And that's if your app can do that for you, it is a game changer. Like you're saying, it's literally a whole different mode of interactivity. And that's why I think this new second brain or this updated second brain concept is exactly like this is the point of it, is that the modes of interaction change. In fact, the ability to work with you is just fundamentally rethought.
Absolutely. I think one of the last things that I would like to touch on is you said that a lot of the barrier which comes is just that barrier to entry, like just that idea of getting started. It's literally just like, how many times have you said that, okay, I'm just going to sit down and maybe read 10 or 15 pages, and then ended up finishing like two or three chapters of a book because you just didn't even realize it? That's totally what could end up happening. You might feel unproductive and unmotivated, but you really just want to get something done. You get one little task done. Then before you know it, you're in a creative flow state and an hour and a half has passed and you've done work that you never would have done before. It just is mind boggling, because the more that I talk about it and the more that I conceptualize it, it, like you said, seems quite realistic and not that far fetched whatsoever.
The last element of this that I think we haven't yet even touched on, which is crazy to think about because this is also happening, is automating tasks and scheduling and like this whole aspect where now the AI actually can have some agency. I still think this is in nascent stages, but I've played with the development tools around AI agents and OpenAI's Assistance API and like actually being able to take action in the real world based on interactivity and interoperability with other systems. This stuff is coming, and if you think about like there may be situations where like if a task is reasonable enough for an AI system to accomplish or make progress on, that even helps more with the productivity because suddenly now it's not just you working, it's this other thing working for you, and it doesn't even have to sleep or do like it could be doing any of those things all the time and helping you constantly make progress. You may sit down and rather than it being like, okay, where do I have to pick up from where I left off, and like, hey, we've done 10 new things since you last sat down, here's a like summary of everything we've done, ready to keep going. Like that's wild.
I couldn't even think about a world in which I could fall asleep, wake up, and I will have like just an entire like study guide ready for a math test the next day. Like that would be just insane. But yeah, it could happen. AI is completing tasks. You're right. That's something we didn't touch on. Just even sure, like thinking about it at a very basic level. Like there are like, I think busy work is the easiest way to put it. I get a lot of busy work in certain classes, and I'm gonna be real, I just don't want to fucking do it because it just takes up my time and it feels like a waste. So most times I get the time to do the busy work in class, But maybe in class, I feel really motivated to be productive. So maybe I'll just be like, yo, AI, go do this stupid journal assignment that I have to do for my English class. Meanwhile, it's doing that. I can go and do something productive, which it recommends to me. Maybe I can edit part of a podcast. Maybe I can, get part of a script done, or I can think out another episode, or I can do some research for something, or I can, maybe I just need some time to relax, or whatever. It unlocks so many capabilities, doesn't it?
I think the sentiment is right there. I definitely want to clarify that I'm not condoning the use of AI to do your homework for you, but I definitely think the point is yes. Like sometimes there are going to be those things where you know that there's just work that needs to get done that is kind of like you say, busy work or kind of mindless tasking that doesn't require a lot of nuance or ingenuity, or I guess like again the things that humans are good at, where the ambiguity level is low. It's like very clear what needs to get done, or at least like it's something that you know that these things are going to be able to do with a high degree of confidence. To your point, again, it's like with the assistants, like there are certain work that you can just offload to them, like because it's stuff that like manage my calendar and whatever else. Like this is stuff that you need to do, or stuff that needs to get done, but you don't necessarily need to do. And so I think that this is where it starts to really change things. And I know that this might seem like it's outside the realm of this quote unquote second brain, but my whole point is that I'm trying to actually encapsulate that into the idea of what the modern second brain is. It is this thing where it's, you can put your information in and it can help you get information out in new and valuable ways, but then it can also help you take action on that information, that knowledge, and you can actually be productive in a different way than has ever been possible before.
Yeah, I that's a good point. Don't have AI doing your homework. I don't use AI to do my work. Just for the record, I'll put it out there. But maybe a better idea of an example task is, you and me were talking about this before we got on. Maybe AI could one day end up exporting the shorts that I've clipped out of the videos and uploading them onto YouTube, because that's a very tedious task. Maybe it takes 15 or 20 minutes, but maybe I'd just rather those 15 or 20 minutes because I'm feeling real lazy to just go sit and maybe listen to some music. Yeah, I can do that. I can listen to music. 20 minutes later, I come back. I feel recharged. Bam, I'm ready. I can go clip out another 5 shorts from the next episode and get them ready to upload. Stuff like that really just enhances your productivity. So yeah, don't have AI do your homework. That's a good point.
Yeah, well, I mean, even to in your example there, like you're right. There should, and I love that you actually use that, because I do think that the whole point there is that maybe that will allow people to feel more comfortable taking breaks when you've been working for a long time, but you know that there's still stuff that needs to get done. It's like if you can take a break and know that something is still, you know, working in the background, will help you feel like you're not wasting time. Even though I feel like people shouldn't think that way. I mean, you can look at our time management episode to understand kind of that philosophy better. But yeah, like I'm even imagining, as you were talking about that editing example, like you could actually be editing an episode and like it could be following along with you. And if once you've gotten past the point where you've edited, like, okay, I'm 3/5 of the way done, and it could be looking for shorts in that first 3/5 of things. So by the time you're done editing the episodes, like imagine that you already have those shorts created once the episode is done. You don't even need to take a break.
Oh man, yeah, you are making me thirst for these things to actually come out, because man, oh man, would that be just a wonderful way to increase productivity. Like the amount of stuff that you could get done would be, oh, it's wild. It's mind-boggling. I don't know how many times I've said redundant things about how crazy it is, but I mean, again, you got to remember, talking to the viewers here, this is some of the first times that I assume you, but myself for sure, is thinking about these things and realizing how realistic and how crazy they sound, and the potential that all of these have for how they can be used for us, how they can be used for you guys. It's just really, the future is so exciting and so bright that I think it's cool that you and me are, taking this time out to conceptualize what the future could look like.
Yeah, and I will say too that I mean I know how much hype is out there about what these tools can do, and I don't think I'm trying to create more of that. I'm trying to be very realistic about what I think these things are capable of and what they actually can do for us. Like just I want to round us out here, but I want to like hammer this point home like above all else, which is we're not talking about magical AI that just is good at everything and can do all the stuff. AGI is here in the next 5 months. Like that's not where we're coming from. I'm talking about like, yes, we have new capabilities, enhanced capabilities. Before, we were only able to do things like keyword searches, like very simple search on your notes to find if you wanted to find relevant ideas. Today, you could do semantic searches that are contextually aware, that can determine intent, that can determine nuance, that help provide information, relevant information, even if it's not so obviously connected. There is deeper pattern recognition capabilities where we've only ever had basic statistical analysis. But now we have potentially models that can look and find very deep ingrained patterns that are not so immediately surfaceable. We've only ever had limited customization and predefined templates and simple automations, but generative models can create new content for us. They can help us brainstorm. They can help us create new content, anything that might come into our minds. They can help us, get more personalized, help anticipate our needs better, and get us closer to what we're actually wanting. We've been in such a state where we've computers have been able to do only so much for us up to a certain point. I do think fundamentally we're at a place where computers can do a little bit more now. It's not magic, it's not that it's going to be able to do everything, but I do think we need to significantly rethink the way we use computers, the way we work with computers to manage our own knowledge. And that's the whole point of the modern second brain concept.
Yeah, my only little thing that I would like to add to that is that the whole point of this being here is to enhance your life. It's not supposed to replace the doing of your life and the doing of your tasks. It should help you. It should make you feel more motivated. It should help you become more productive. It shouldn't do everything for you so you can sit around and be lazy and not be productive. The whole point is that it should help enhance, like I said, enhance what you can do and motivate you to get more done, not make you more lazy and sit around and feel like you don't have to get anything done and still get benefits from it.
Absolutely. I mean, again, all we'll say is that there are new capacities available. Computers can do more. We should be aware of what those things are, be prepared for them, and start thinking about how we can organize our systems more efficiently with this in mind. So we will definitely be looking at tools, techniques, tips for actually doing that. But I wanted to take this episode to make sure that we were all on the same page about what we really mean by a second brain of the modern personal management system.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. Is there anything else you would like to touch on before I take us home here?
No, that's great.
Alrighty. If you guys enjoyed this episode, you can find more wrong idea content just like this on Instagram, TikTok, and X. And until next time, keep being wrong.
Got a thought that challenges the norm? We want to hear it. Post your wrong idea with the hashtag #WrongIdea. That's RONG idea. And join the conversation. Who knows? Your perspective might just be featured in a future episode. Remember, in a world of endless perspectives, all ideas are wrong ideas. Until next time, keep thinking, keep challenging, and keep embracing the unconventional.